Today, we're talking about bad writing advice. All of the advice that I'm going to share with you in this video isn't completely bad. I don't think this advice is bad per se, I think it's just misunderstood. Within all of the things I'm going to share with you today, there is a grain of good writing advice. Things that will genuinely improve your writing. These pieces of advice are often presented, however, in a way that kind of misses the point. We aren't getting the whole picture, and there are things that you can learn from this advice that will genuinely improve your writing. Let's start with my all-time favorite, said is dead. This advice relates to dialogue tags and says that you should avoid using said whenever possible. You should instead reach for alternatives like retorted, exclaimed, announced, muttered, thundered, pontificated. I don't know exactly who first popularized this advice. It's kind of a he said, she said sort of thing. In truth, it's generally recommended that 95% of your dialogue tags be either said or asked. The reason you want to use said and asked as your most common dialogue tags is that these words are invisible to the reader. Yes, they don't add anything, but it also doesn't cost you anything to put them in. Like a lot of bad advice, this one stems from a valid need. With dialogue, you want to convey to the reader not only what is being said, but also how it's being said. Specifically, the emotional state of the character while they're delivering the line of dialogue. This advice recommends you do that through your dialogue tags. Fancy dialogue tags are one way to do this. Not a good way, which is why they're on this list. A better way is to simply write dialogue where the tone of what is being said is clear to the reader. Short, abrupt sentences can convey anger. Somebody who's nervous may speak in stammering, halted sentences. You can also convey emotion through the beats or the actions of the character while they're speaking the dialogue. Someone delivers a line of dialogue while banging on a table, then that likely means that they're angry. So remember that you do want to convey how your dialogue is being spoken to the reader. Advice number 2, show, don't tell. I don't really have an issue with this advice itself. It's more the way that it's presented. Usually, at least in my case, I was taught to show all of the time and avoid telling like it was the plague. Like a lot of things, it's not as cut and dry as that, and there's a bit more nuance to it. There are a lot of times where it's better to show the reader what is happening rather than telling them. Damn near an equal number of times where telling is better than showing. Take a scene where you have a character leaving their home and walking to the store. In order to show the reader this, you would have to describe their entire journey, the route they took, how fast they walked, all those sorts of things. Whereas telling them, you just literally need to say, character A walked to the store. Showing this information to the reader that our character walked from their house to the store is likely going to take at least a couple of paragraphs. Telling them, though, is probably going to take a couple of sentences. Hell, if you wanted to, you could just start the next scene with the character at the store, and the fact that they traveled there is sort of implied. Telling is much more succinct and quicker to get information across. Showing tends to take more of the reader's time and more of the narrative energy. If what you are showing has no bearing on the plot or any effect on characterization, then what you're really doing is giving the reader extra information that they don't really need and slowing down the story as a result. When you tell something to the reader, everybody is going to have a slightly different picture in their mind of what is happening. Showing allows you to ensure that everybody is picturing, if not the same image, at least a similar image. If it's not important for your readers to imagine the exact same thing, then you are probably okay to go ahead and just tell the information. However, if you need to convey additional information or say something more specific about what is happening, then you need to make sure that you show. I guess all this to say that any good novel or other piece of writing is going to have a balance between showing and telling. If you veer too much towards telling, your work is going to read like a newspaper article. It's going to feel to the reader like they're reading a summary of the events that took place, not reliving them through narrative. If, on the other hand, you veer too much towards showing, then the story is going to become excruciating to read. Your reader is going to have to push through a whole bunch of information that has no bearing on the plot or on the characters. Things that you could have just told them very succinctly, you're now spending lots and lots of time showing them. This advice is well-intentioned and it is correct. There are a lot of times where you want to show. And how good you are at showing things to the reader is one of the major factors that determines the quality of your writing. Equally important, though, is to know what information can be simply told to the reader. Point number 3, write what you know. Full disclosure, I don't think I was ever actually told this, but it is something that I hear a lot, so I'm covering it here. Ostensibly, what this advice is telling you is to only write about things you are familiar with, about experiences you've had, about places you've lived, about people you've met. Now, there is some truth to this. If you've lived through something or experienced something firsthand, then you will likely be able to write about it better than somebody who hasn't. That doesn't mean, however, that you can't write about things you haven't personally experienced. It just means you need to do your research beforehand. Whether you're writing about another culture, an illness, scientific doodads, or forensic procedures, you need to make sure you do your research before you start writing. While you can find out a lot of information online, it's better if you can talk to actual experts in the thing that you're writing about. Even better if you can have these experts review your manuscript and point out any potential issues. Experts in a subject are generally quite knowledgeable about that subject. If you fail to do proper research, you risk creating work that is inaccurate or offensive. So don't worry about tackling a subject that you know nothing about, but make sure that you learn some stuff about the thing that you're writing and talk to people who know stuff about the thing you're writing before you start writing. I've seen this advice rephrased as write what you've researched, and I think that's a much better way to say it. So there you go. Those are 3 common pieces of bad writing advice that all have good writing advice underneath the surface. You just have to dig a little. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more of this content, make sure you're subscribed. I post writing advice videos every Wednesday, and I will see you next time.